afternoon. Thanks for coming at this late hour to my presentation. Okay, so I should start presenting myself. I've been in this industry for 20 years. Already as a student, I was a games reviewer, a journalist. Then when I graduated from the English faculty, I set up a company called Roboto, which deals in localization, testing, voiceover, etc. So what I'm about to tell you here is how to survive your outsourced work. Because, okay, so the first question would be, any of you already shipped a game, marketed a game? Yeah, one person here, second person here, third person here. Or working on a game right now, perhaps? The same kind of people. All right, so it doesn't apply to everyone, but to most of the people. Sooner or later, you will outsource your work, or perhaps, being in this industry, you can also be on the outsourced side. So you will be actually the people who will be providing services for the industry. And some things that may be quite obvious actually are not obvious, so I'm going to give you 5 pillars how to survive your outsourced work. Every single one will be also followed by a case study of real stuff that we covered in the last years. So the first one will be Symmetry. And by symmetry here, I mean whatever you would like to expect your vendor, your service provider provide for you, you should also in a way expect of yourself, right? Of course, you may say there is no real symmetry because the one party is paying, the other party gets paid. In that context, of course, that's true, right? But if you really want to be successful, then think about it. You would like your vendor to be professional, to be always on time, to be always available, right? Now the question is, when you need to judge the effects or communicate back to that vendor, am I professional enough in my feedback? Is it really based on facts, or perhaps I'm just having a bad day, or any other reason that may actually turn your feedback into a non-objective feedback? And what is the real assessment or the basis of your assessment? Now, when you establish your relation with a vendor, with an outsourced company, I mean, I'm not going to give you ideal tips how to find those companies because, well, there are different algorithms you may use. Like friend told you that that's a good company, or you Googled the company, or you met them at the trade fair, whatever. So we are past that stage. Then you would like to set up a sort of working relation with somebody who needs to cover some work for you. Now, there are usually 2 different approaches on how to work with the outside company. So one is relational, and the other is transactional. Transactional, of course, is very tempting because that basically means that you get the best deal out there for this particular day, right? So usually that means the cheapest, right? And it is tempting. It will be tempting for me too, right? Who would like to spend more money than is necessary, right? Especially on the outsourced work. But if you want to continue your relation, if you want to really benefit the most from your projects, try and get this relational approach. Because if you want your vendor to go down the extra mile, like, okay, so you are like really not inside your own deadline, and you would like those people to help you with it, if they feel that you are working on your relation and you will come back with the next project, if they help you today, they will do that. But if they feel that, okay, so it's just about the money, so why would I even go down the extra mile? That's the other question. So, are we partners or are we master and the servant, right? I mean, it's tempting, of course, to be the master and the servant, but in that context, it's really better to be partners. So it's also swift communication. Am I as quick as they are in that kind of communication, right? So I have had projects for which we asked, for instance, 500 questions throughout the project just to get contextual information or some additional information about the project. And for instance, we didn't receive half of the answers, right? So it's not really possible then to deliver perfect product if the person who is actually making the game doesn't have the time to help you provide the perfect quality, right? So make yourselves available, understand the other person, just be as communicative as you would like this other person to be. Now, deadline actually is a joint problem, right? I mean, if you work with a well-established company, whether it's localization or testing or sound or 3D modeling or whatever else connected with your game, for you and your game, there is this one deadline for your game, right? Now, for this vendor, usually it's one of the I would say 50 deadlines or 100 deadlines for different other projects, right? So you need to take certain responsibility on yourself, right? So this is my deadline too, not just the deadline for the vendor. And of course, cool-headed problem solving is always the best idea. So you would like your partner to be professional and don't shout at you, right? Which is probably the same kind of situation you would like to have on your end. So I can't be mad if they won't be mad either. So now, the case study. I'm going to give you some project details. Okay. All right. So that was a pretty big game. It's like AA plus kind of game that was released this year on the market. And initially, now look at the timeline here. This is the thing, right? So we initially were supposed to start in October, finish around March. Actually, we started in early February, late January, and worked towards mid-April. As you can see, that's less than a half of the timeline that we originally had. And that wasn't the only problem with that fantastic project, because the game, by the way, is great. I'm not going to give you the name, but I won't. But it is a very, very good game. But the point is, it was also defragmented. So we received text in 18 different batches, which makes it really difficult, because you need to go back to previous batches, just constantly redo the stuff that you've already been completing, more or less. And that means that basically we just wanted to save the day for the publisher, right? Because they were late in development. We knew that they really relied on us to make up for the lost time, so we did whatever necessary to do. And then we received this kind of comment from the guy who was running the project. He picked on one word in one language, and he said, this is like ultimate crime on the Polish language, and there are plenty other cases. Now, objectively, that person was wrong, because the translation was right, which we explained, by the way, but I don't know if he bought it or not. The point is, he also wrote, there is more. And then he questioned the quality of all the other languages. So he found one word out of one language, out of like 500,000 words we localized. And he said, okay, I don't like it. Probably it's all screwed up. We need to talk about it, right? So luckily, we managed to resolve that situation on the management level, so to speak. So the thing here is, expect the same kind of thing from yourself if you want to receive something from the other party. So that was symmetry, the first one. Now modesty, the next pillar. So heads up, people who like to be criticized, even if criticism is well-based. Anyone? Well, I like it, by the way. Yeah, one person, thank you for that. The second person, thank you for that. Yeah, but you can accept that, although you don't like it, but if it's based on real facts, then it's okay, just work on yourself. Now, you as developers, programmers, would you like to have your basic skills questioned as a programmer? Probably not, right? So don't do that to the other people on the other, bank of the river, which means you're outsourced people. Because if you work with a company like, I'd say ours, right? We've done more than 1,000 titles in our history. So probably that means that we know a thing or two about, this particular service that we are providing. So if we sometimes tell you, look, hey, we should do it this way, just listen, right? Because you're probably gonna draw some benefits from that, right? So yeah, that's the question. So the basic fair assumption would be, assume that you don't know everything about everything. I mean, it works in all walks of life, not just, the outsourced cooperation, right? But it's like, listen to the people. Now, the fundamental question, because that's the usual igniting point in cooperation between companies who would like to cover a project together, is the selection of a person who should be dealing with this outsourced work on your part as the outsourcing party. The point about smaller developers or just the newcomers, so to speak, is that it's like, okay, so you're free today and you're going to be free tomorrow, so yeah, you'll cover that project with those people, right? You've never done it before. You have no clue about working with, you know, the external parties, but yeah, you are now free, so you can cover that. It's a highway to hell, basically. So ideally, this should be a person, and if you have a look at the short, not exclusive list of things that this person should have, right? So I would draw your attention to being empathetic, first of all, right? So if you can really, really listen why certain people argument in a certain way, then you'll probably be better off with your project. Now, of course, you need to be a good listener, negotiator, because, you know, the outsourced work is usually procrastinated or it's done at the very last moment, right? So usually that means there is not enough time. You need to negotiate deadlines. You need to tell them, okay, so we are late with development. Can you please help us out, etc. Which also means that this person, potentially, it would be a good idea to have some prior experience, either as a frontman in your organization, I don't know, BizDev, or a person who actually work with the external parties, or they themselves had some prior experience in being the outsourced representative for a company, right? So then it's going to be this person. Remember, I mean, usually you don't meet your vendors in person. They don't meet you in person either. Usually it's via email, sometimes it's phone call, sometimes a kickoff in Skype, if there's time for it. So usually we perceive each other as addresses, as email addresses, right? So it's not a living person. It's just somebody that types something, right? So if you cannot communicate properly, there is like a lot of reasons why you could argue with your vendor. So this is a very short list. It's not exclusive, but it helps survive your outsource. So now case study for this one. Some project details. Come on. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Right. So that's the project details. So that's a pretty big game, almost 200,000 words, which we were requested to localize first from Polish to English, then from English to French. And since they and that was a good thing, by the way, the publisher realized they need to have LQA, which is linguistic quality assurance. In other words, linguistic testing of your localized content. Why is it a thing to point out? Because sometimes this part is completely neglected or it's not done at all, right? Which is a very bad idea. So they actually wanted to do it. And they asked us, okay, so there is this 160,000 words. Now, how many hours should we actually assign to testing that game? Ideally, if that was a AAA publisher like Electronic Arts or Sega, they would say somewhere in the area of 300 to 400 or even more, basically, depending on the gameplay, right? When it got to the point that we actually had to quote this service, we by that time we had realized that the publisher doesn't really like spending money, to say the least, right? So we said, okay, if we tell them 300 hours per language, they're gonna go bananas on us, right? So there can be 400 hours. So we are trying to figure out what kind of minimum number of hours we should assign so that at least we can secure more or less the right quality. So we told them 160, which is close to mission impossible, because it's really virtually impossible almost to cover LQA of that many words in 160 hours, but at least you get something, right? So now, what does the person answer to us? There you go. So he says, yeah, we estimate the gameplay time of a thorough player at below 10 hours for a single playthrough. As such, I have to admit, I don't quite see how we arrived at 160 hours. In other words, why do you want to rob me, right? We were trying to explain. I mean, who has performed or has had the game performed in LQA in your career, right? So you know that it's a completely different type of playing, right? It's not like I'm gonna play it through, have fun, and I'm gonna tell you if I like the game or not. No, you need to, look under every single corner. You need to read all the text inside, even if they are fundamentally boring. You still have to do it. Then you need to have print screens, then you need to report everything, then you need to regress and correct it. So that's a lot of things that you have to do. And it's a completely different thing than just, okay, 10 hours of a single playthrough, why do we have 160? Now, how did that situation ended? I can't tell you because it has not ended yet. So we are having actually meeting on Thursday with those people, trying to explain to them how linguistic quality assurance works, and just to look them in the eyes and tell them, no, we don't want to steal your money. We just want to help you provide the right product on the market. So that was modesty. Now the third pillar would be anticipation. Plan ahead for everyone's sake, not just for you. And again, I've said that, but it can be repeated. The outsource work, particularly the localization or testing or audio, is absolutely procrastinated, delayed, put off, postponed. I can go on with synonyms because it happens every single day, right? So it would be a very good idea to think about it in advance. Ask your potential vendor how they would like to structure the work so that it's as good as possible. Now, why does it happen? Sometimes it happens for a simple reason that there is no prior experience on the publisher or developer part in that context. So they don't know how to start, when to start, what to do actually. Or the other thing is they procrastinate the initiation of a project because they don't really understand why would they even do it. I mean, okay, so I've got this game in English, it's fine, it's great, it's looking good, I'm focusing on my, polishing my gameplay, and now I'm supposed to spend zillions of dollars on localization. Why would I do it, right? There are, of course, many reasons why you would do it, because you want to sell more copies, but they don't know it. So, for instance, if you ask me, in our particular line of business, the localization business, when and how to start with that project, so the golden advice would be, do it at a later stage in development, close to finalization of your game, but don't do it too late, right? Because you need to reserve a certain amount of time for the people who actually are supposed to provide the localization for you. Now, you need to always anticipate some buffer time. It's really like renovating your flat, right? So you sort of assume that you're gonna spend 3 months, and then actually 3 months end, and you need at least 1 month, or you actually divorce your wife or husband, right? Because it's already like the 5th month, right? They say never build a house if you want to go on being in marriage, right? So here it's also, just anticipate this buffer time, it's needed. And now follow the right workflow sequence. I mean, I'm not master chef in cooking, but if you tell me, okay, Bartek, can you do scrambled eggs for me? So probably I wouldn't start by frying eggs on a cold frying pan, right? So probably, bacon and, heating up the pan. Yeah, now I'm master chef. Anyway, so that's the same thing is about localization, for instance. It's a very, very short scenario. If you wanted to have your game localized and dubbed with audio to a particular language or a set of languages, right? What you should start with, first of all, you need to compile all the reference materials. You need to more or less finalize your script, or at least part of that script that is ready for localization. It would be a very good idea to have some sort of kickoff call with your vendor to discuss certain ideas, or just, the schedule, etc. So that's the pre-work, pre-phase, so to speak. Then the first part should be translation and proofreading, and then you should have the first round of LQA before you actually record, for a very simple reason that if you don't do it, there's going to be a lot of errors or just contextual mistakes you will have to re-record after that, and it's costly because this pickup session usually is the most expensive one. And then make one more round of LQA and you're fun, you can ship the game. So easy, right? Now the question is, what happens if you don't follow the right sequence? So the case study with project details. Again, indie publisher, this time around it's adventure psychological game, English translation, script preparation, and English dubbing. 20,000 words, 3,000 lines. No LQA testing on text translation before recordings, assets late by 2 months, obviously, and because of that, obviously, recording window shortened from 2 weeks to 7 days. So what do we do? Of course, we say, hey, yeah, all right, it happens, right? It's not like anything new. The point is, if you even had linguistic testing on text translation, there is still going to be pickups. The point is, there are going to be fewer pickups than without this LQA phase, right? So you just limit the number of issues, and you also economize, right? Because you save, like if you ask an actor to come to the studio and record 200 lines, which is gonna take like 3 hours, it's gonna be more or less the same kind of cost if you ask him or her to come back again and record 5 lines, because they're gonna just give you like the readiness fee that you will have to pay, right? So the smaller number, the better for you. It didn't happen here, and we received that kind of email from the CEO of this indie publisher. Evidently, we received a faulty product. LQA found a dozen lines to re-record. I expect an apology and compensation. That was the least nasty sentence that he wrote in that email. Actually, the rest referred to you know, things like my mother and some other stuff. So yeah, people in my office know me that when I start typing like this, it means I received that kind of email. But what do I do? You know, after 16 years of my experience, I know that and then sending back won't help, right? So actually, I wrote that email just to let off some steam. Then I, of course, just, you know, copied that. Then I made the first review. Then I reread it again, said, oh, no, that's not ready yet. So I made the second review, then asked some people to read that second review, and then I sent over the feedback, trying to explain the basics of, you know, localization. I never got an apology for that. It was like the mute consent, so he didn't send back anything, so that was like a great achievement. We are still working-ish together. And that's a nice, sorry, not nice. That's an interesting epilogue. I received a piece of information today that this guy resigned as CEO 2 days ago. So probably there's not going to be emails like that in our cooperation anymore. So jokes aside, follow the right sequence, because it diminishes, you know, the potential igniting points, and it also allows you to save money. As simple as that. So the fourth pillar would be reasonableness. So there will always be high expectations when you outsource, because you want to have a very good product. You hired a very skilled vendor. They want you to pay them dearly, of course. So you would like to have like a very good product, right? So the reasonable expectations would be like this. Again, not in a very exclusive list. It's pretty self-explanatory, right? So you would like to have a vendor who is available, who provides the right quality, who is good at communicating, supports post-service. This is the thing that I haven't said yet before in this presentation. The post-service support is really crucial, because the games these days, they are not like one-off events and it's done, right? Usually you will have like, you know, newsletters, storefront texts, little updates, blah, 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 whatever, right? There is a lot of it. So you have every right to expect, you know, your vendor that they will actually help you with those little ones, because they've already done the big one. Reasonable pricing, obviously. Flexibility, obviously. Now, what is not reasonable, or is slightly less reasonable, to put that in this perspective, would be these. Okay, so they are given as quotes. Actually, no one writes stuff like that directly in their emails. They sort of imply it, right? So, so the first one is that they should never object to what I say. Their role is to make up for the time we wasted. I don't want to be bothered with questions, suggestions, etc., because I don't have the time for it. So that's just, in a nutshell, what you can sometimes infer from the emails you receive from your client. Now, my personal favorite is this little thing here. 3 knobs with quality, speed, and price. We had this internal joke at Roboto that the client calls us and he says, look, I would like to have a very cheap and good localization. The answer is, why do you need 2? I mean, 1 is enough, of good quality, right? So you can't actually maximize those 3 algorithms here, right? So it's either of super quality and with the right speed, or it's super cheap, but it's not of high quality. So you just cannot have everything here, right? You need to have a certain compromise. My recommendation, of course, would be to focus on quality first, then think about your deadline, and then try to be reasonable with pricing. But you can't be like Google. I mean, the cheapest vendor for your localization is Google, right? Probably not of the very best quality, but very quick, right? So they're very quick, very cheap, but probably not giving you the right quality. So choose two and try to combine them. Now, a case study, one of my favorites actually in that presentation. So a little bit of sorry, yeah, I'm here. Okay, so that was a AAA indie dev last year, who from overseas, who negotiated a huge title, which was more than 1.2 million words in localization, written in a very demanding, difficult English, like this kind of poetic, semi-medieval, whatnot kind of language, right? So it is really difficult to convey this text into your target languages. So they wanted us to provide localization into Polish and Russian. Okay, it's our natural habitat. Why not? Of course, they wanted to have it super cheap. Now, we got entangled in a sort of very surreal, absurd negotiations, which you would expect to have, you know, in a bazaar in Dubai or Ankara or Cairo, not like in the localization. Well, but then again, okay, they would like to economize. I don't mind. And it's not only that. They wanted to complete this localization in how many months? 4 months. So imagine you need to translate something that is 3 times the size of the Lord of the Rings trilogy in 4 months. So, okay, doable, but you need to really have experts. You need to have a lot of those experts, preferably in one room so they can communicate between one another, and just then, you know, light a candle in your church and, you know, pray for good luck. So we are trying to negotiate that deal, and it ended up with a situation that they said, okay, we have a vendor from California, which gave us half a cent less than you per word. So that was like, you know, nothing basically. And I was like, okay, I remember I gave them really good prices. I thought about those 4 months and the Polish and the Russian localization done in Poland as opposed to the same thing done in California. I figured, that may be an issue, but if you want to economize this half a cent, there you go, what can I do? You're paying after all. And the epilogue here, a few weeks passed, and I get a phone call from Techland, which is a publisher in Poland, my old friends and my old-time client, and they say, hey Bartek, are you working on that title? And I was like, haha, no. Why are you asking? Because, you know what, we received some strange feedback about the quality. Can you please assess the quality of localization? We have this template, which we called spot check QA template for assessing the level of localization. It scores from 0 to 100 points. If you score 100 points, you're perfect. If you score 0, you're 0, right? So whatever is below 80%, we sort of think, okay, we should have a closer look at it. Just to be sure that we are not mistaken, I sent it to 2 different proofreaders with 2 different parts of that text. One got back to me with 11 out of 100 result, and the other with -81. I didn't even know it's possible. I thought you reach 0 and that's it. No, you can be -81. So that's like, you know, a super legend these days at Robota. Say, yeah, you've got, but it's 80 points. It's fine, right? But oh yeah, you've got the minus before this 81, so probably not fine. So we were like, you know, those firefighters to the rescue. Again, 3 months, 6 people working, but they just wanted to correct Polish, not Russian. The same situation was with Russian, by the way. And for this very correction of Polish, they paid 6 times more than they economized initially on negotiations, right? I mean, okay, so if they can afford it, because of course Techland re-invoiced then the developer for this job. And they didn't do Russian, and those are just 2 of the quotes from the Russian media about the Russian localization. Again, not the harshest one. By the way, there was a similar comment on the Spanish localization with, I quote, Spanish text causes cancer to the eye, something like that. So, and you would think, I mean, for instance, Poles are famous for not learning from their mistakes or even some other people's mistakes. Apparently, we are not the only country who does that, because these guys from this AAA indie dev have just released another title, a big one again, And the Polish localization, if I remember, there's this button that appears everywhere called close. Now, how did they translate that? The back translation of the Polish text would be almost there. Yeah, so I would love to write an email to them, yeah, you're almost there. But you're not there yet, right? So they're not learning. What can you do? They've got every right to do so. Now, transparency, the last thing, transparency international. Just in a very nutshell, be open and sincere in your communication, right? I mean, don't beat about the bush. I mean, you don't have to be too severe, by the way, but just, be open when you communicate. It's always better. Because remember, the professional outsource companies actually always aim for a long-term relation. They are not there for a quick buck. For a very simple reason that they would like to have a working relation with you guys. Then probably you would recommend them to some other people. And one dissatisfied client sometimes can negate your 100 satisfied clients because they keep on like, hey, don't work with this guys. Because like, yeah. So draw from that. Talk to the people. Now, even if you and your vendor are in a perfect marriage, there will still be silent days, right? But instead of throwing plates against the wall and insult mothers again, perhaps a very good idea just to sit down and think about those three things here. So first of all, even if you really want to chop their heads off, do it in a way they will feel anxious about losing their heads, right? So that's the first thing. Now, then think about the joint action. I mean, what do we really want to do about it? If there is an issue, we need to resolve that issue. I mean, together, not me, not you, like just you or just me. We need to do it together. And then it's always a very good idea, even without problems along the way, to have a certain post-mortem. So you just, draw up things after the game or the project has completed, because you will be able to analyze the entire process. And perhaps I shouldn't say that as a localization company, but if your post-mortem gives you every reason to divorce your vendor, then divorce your vendor. I mean, you're not, you have not given the oath, like, till death you part. Yeah, that's the right quote. So you really can do that, right? But again, shake hands, say good luck, go your own way. And now here comes my really favorite case study about transparency. The last case study for today. Okay, so mid-sized publisher, action-adventure typing game, multi-language localization task of 10,000 words, and non-exclusive deal, which means sometimes you provide part of the languages, someone else provides the other languages. Well, I don't like that kind of setup because sometimes your accountability dissipates, right? So you really don't know who is actually responsible for what. But okay, if the publisher wants just 5 languages from us out of 10, fine, it's still better than 0 languages from us, right? So we provided the translation on time, everything went smooth, everybody was happy. But for some reason, the publisher just cut off communication with us. So we figured, okay, perhaps the person who was responsible for that project doesn't work there anymore. Oh, they forgot to find a substitution. Oh, there is just no new work done. But this year, we met them in Cologne at Gamescom and asked why. What happened, really? And here is the excerpt from the real conversation. Yeah, right. Frankly, your Asian translation was so bad, we had big trouble publishing in Japan, for example. But we did not do any Asian languages for this game, Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I need to go, right? So that kind of the most absurd situation you can actually find yourself in. So that's why transparency is always good, because if they had communicated that, straight off, it's like, okay, your Japanese is bad. It was like, hey, yeah, we did not do Japanese, for Christ's sake, right? It's not us. I don't know how many projects we actually lost along the way because they didn't want to work with us. And then there you go. Oh, really? So to sum up, the 5 pillars. So be symmetrical, be modest, anticipate things, be reasonable with your expectations, and then be transparent. Simply, in other words, when you outsource, be smart. That's it. Thank you. Any questions, perhaps? Questions? Questions, Your Honor? Don't be shy. Just one question, any question, because if I'm not like getting questions from you, probably they won't invite me anymore. Yeah?
Maybe can you mention any funny situation about the translations during your cooperation with companies?
Oh, how much time do we have? Like 2 hours? Is that going to be enough? No? Yeah. For instance, that's usually connected with publishers having their own ideas how to prepare work. So, one of the situations we got a log kit, which is like the huge Excel file of 5,000 lines, and somebody wanted to make it easier for us to translate because those were just dialogues. So he just did this alphabetical, order. And we said, seriously, alphabetical order? Respect. Now, how are we supposed to find like who speaks to whom and on what's? Yeah, here is the dialogue tree, and dialogue tree is like this big. So yeah, alphabetical order, dialogue tree. There you go. The other situation, quite connected or close to that. We had that was Heroes of Might and Magic 5. Jesus, when was that? I'm that old. And we localized the script, which was well presented. And then they asked us to localize the in-game text, the storyline, all those things, etc. Right through the big file, I see that I've seen those sentences before. They actually send the script again, but mixed with all the other stuff inside the in-game file. And then when we connected, those individual lines, they didn't actually make sense. So that's another thing. The third thing, perhaps not funny, but one of the things that are quite important when you localize, that's why it's called localization, not translation, right? Because you try to localize into a territory, so that means cultural adaptation, stuff like that. And this is one of the crucial things that actually sell games, sometimes, usually, if it's done right. So, for instance, we localized, I participated in that Sunset Overdrive for Microsoft into Polish, and it's really written fantastically in English, right? And my translators just did whatever they could, the best they could. And I noticed, because I was the editor proofreader of that project, that somewhere inside that text, 2 characters speak like Walter White and Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad. Almost the same kind of, vernacular, so to speak. And of course, there was the mention of Heisenberg, right? Because if you saw Breaking Bad, Walter White was referred to as Heisenberg, right? So the translator wanted to be clever, and he said, okay, Heisenberg is not gonna click in Poland, let's do Einstein, right? And I was like, oh no, not really, right? Let's just leave Heisenberg. So this little, a good translator, a good editor needs to be well versed and well immersed in their cultural setup. So books, movies, TV series, whatnot, right? Because then you can do it right. You try to, with those little touches, you can make a whole difference. So that's the third thing, if that answers your question. Any more questions? Oh yeah, the second question. They're gonna invite me for sure.
Yay. So, quick question. How can developers make a life a bit easier for you, localization guys?
Well, the first thing would be to do all that stuff here, but the most important ones would be to really plan ahead, to provide as much reference material as possible, right? So not just dry Excel file with some text, or PO file for Christ's sake, which is even worse. If you've got like the character Bible, if you want to talk about your characters, how we would like them to sound in the game, that's really fundamental. And then this availability throughout the process. So if we ask 500 questions for an RPG game and you answer just 50 of them, oh yeah, by the way, funny situations, we asked those questions for one of the projects, and we received a very passive aggressive nice reply with a Bart Simpson writing on the board, "I will not ask stupid questions," right? So, okay, thank you. I was just trying to help, but I don't have to ask questions if you don't want to. So yeah, helping us along the way, preparing materials well, and planning ahead and listening to what we say is the crucial thing. Of course, you can criticize. Criticism is great. Not that I like it, but it is great. But those would be the fundamental things. Anything else? With the third question, I'm gonna get the bonus probably. So no, probably not. Good for you guys. I'm not gonna get the bonus. Thank you again. It was a pleasure to talk to you.